Bonjour à tous.
Good afternoon, everyone. As not a French delegate, but as a chair for this year of the Man Action Support Group, I am honored to chair this last roundtable on finances, which is obviously not unuseful, but it is very useful indeed to have a roundtable on financing, because we are going through difficult times with new conflicts in the recent years, such with Iraq and today with Ukraine, creating dramatic situations, and the needs for finances are increasing. This is a real challenge for everyone, and this is therefore very important to think together about financing and how do we get funds with two donor countries at our roundtable and two beneficiary countries. This will allow us to get answers and to shed light on different aspects, different questions that we ask ourselves. How can the current level of finances can remain stable or even increase? How can we ensure that it is not decreasing? What are the challenges to face to maintain this level of finances? How can the donors countries do organized definition of priorities when it comes to different actions and the financing sector? How can we be sure that finance will go directly to the most needed countries, populations, and that we have priorities set at the world level depending on population's needs? What are the different strategies, stakeholders in terms of finances? How can find the national authorities of mine action can be convinced in order to find new funds? Do we have good practices, examples, when it comes to finding funds, fundraising and financing as well? There are methods to recommend. Are there methods to recommend in order to increase funds? These are the multiple questions we can ask ourselves. So if I may, before I will give the floor to our different panelists, I would like to share some personal views with you and some priorities I wanted to give to this French chair of the Man Action Support Group. So I would like to report two topics, and the French ordered a study which is ongoing by the CGICHD on the cost of demining of clearance. And it is true that often during our meetings we discuss about respecting convention, diplomatic issues, but also it is good that all the delegates have a reference set on how much does it cost to do mining clearance. It can help us making decisions. Also, I've started consultations after a few remarks I've heard coming from non-governmental bodies on topics we didn't mention so much, and that would be very important to mention them, to look at them. I'm talking about the national obstacles when it comes to beneficiary countries to mine clearance. Often, donors who are willing to help beneficiary countries have found themselves in a really paradoxical situation. They could not spend the credits, for instance, because authorization, clearance, deadlines, accreditation deadlines of the NGOs sometimes were 9 months periods, really long, even if it's about OMAG, Allo Trust NGOs, really well-known NGOs, or because sometimes the NGO agents didn't have visas, or because the processes, the clearance processes were extremely long. And this is a shame, because the beneficiary countries are in fact responsible of the fact that credits are not coming. And this is extremely this is a real adverse situation, and therefore we can find ourselves losing credits 1 year and not finding them the following year. So I believe this is a dimension we don't mention enough. And practically on the ground, it should be observed. We should here decide of good practices for beneficiary countries when we are involved in mine clearance. We should do all what we can to ease the life of people in charge of clearance. It's not like me, who is coming from a country at the head of which we had General de Gaulle, you know, and of course we do understand that it is really obvious that we need clearance processes when we tackle mine clearance. So often I believe in some situations we could have an easier, simpler, faster process. And I believe that this is a real issue for a certain number of countries. These were a few remarks I wanted to share with you as an introduction. And now I would like, despite my love for bilingualism, I will switch to French.
Mrs. Karen Chandler, Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Program and Operation in the Bureau of Political Military Affairs, U.S. Department of State. Mrs. Chandler is responsible for programs that address the threat of landmine and unexploded ordnance and strengthen U.S. national security by preventing illicit proliferation of small arms and light weapons, including man-portable air defense system. She guides and directs peacekeeping policy and program to augment the global capacity to respond to peacekeeping operations worldwide, and she provides overall direction for global program to professional foreign security partners. And I have the pleasure to address that it's always a pleasure to work with you. And we had multiple occasions of bilateral meeting by mail or Zoom, and to work with your country, which is the first donor and who made this week great announcements. We all appreciate. You have the floor.
Merci, Ambassador Marek. I'm happy to be here participating in my first Mine Action Directors meeting. This is my first trip as Director of State Department's Office of Weapon Removal and Abatement. It's really been wonderful, after such a long time, to meet everyone in person and hear about your work firsthand. As many of you are aware, part of what my team and I do is to oversee the United States Conventional Weapons Destruction Program, which is a foreign assistance program that includes humanitarian mine action, as well as efforts to improve conventional munitions stockpile security. For the United States, the Conventional Weapons Destruction Program and humanitarian mine action are important tools for achieving broader foreign policy objectives. With this in mind, I want to talk a little bit today about how country and community priorities can maintain donor attention for mine action programs during these uncertain times. As we consider mine action financing against the backdrop of the waning pandemic, the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, climate change, and myriad other challenges facing the global community, I think we can largely agree that the single largest impediment is, perhaps, a shrinking pool of funding being divided among a seemingly ever-increasing number of issues that require attention. In the current environment, governments are redrawing their national budgets to meet a shifting financial environment and emerging crises. Some donor governments have scaled back their foreign assistance programs to address pandemic-related costs at home, and some affected states are forced to shift their own resources away from mine action to address the continued humanitarian threat that COVID poses. As Putin continues to wage his unprovoked, unjustified, and shockingly brutal war of conquest against Ukraine, helping Ukraine to defend itself from Russia's forces has become a top priority for many of our governments, requiring a significant amount of resources. And as Putin's war generates economic ripples across the globe that impact all of us, we find that our resources no longer stretch quite as far as they once did. The challenge before us, then, is to maintain robust global funding for mine action as the overall resource pie shrinks. Understanding this challenge, it's more important than ever to demonstrate how mine action can advance broader policy goals in a dynamic global environment. Now, What do I mean by this, and why is it important? The sector has made great strides demonstrating the positive impacts that humanitarian mine action assistance has achieved over the past 3 decades. And work demonstrating the link between mine action and development has been an important step forward. That said, senior policymakers, the leaders of our governments who are in a position to make resource allocation decisions, have their own policy priorities. And unless mine action specifically, or international development more broadly, are among their policy priorities, they're likely to allocate resources towards other lines of effort that directly support their priorities. The incredibly good news here is that mine action is an exceptionally versatile tool for achieving numerous and varied policy goals. Understanding the big picture policy goals of our government leaders and demonstrating to them how mine action can help them achieve those goals is one key to maintain robust funding levels for mine action. Simply put, saying that mine action is important for its own sake, or even for the sake of facilitating development, may no longer be enough to prevent reductions in global demining support in today's funding environment. Instead, to maintain funding, it's necessary to go several steps further and show how mine action will help our senior decision makers and senior political leaders achieve their own goals and objectives. And we can't take for granted that senior decision makers will necessarily see the linkages between mine action and their policy priorities until we tell them. The job for all of us here today is to make as convincing a case as possible. For my team and me at the State Department, this means showing how mine action contributes to various US government foreign policy priorities. At any given time, this can mean that we're establishing linkages between mine action and several very different initiatives. For example, today we're drawing attention to the fact that mine action is a valuable tool for combating food insecurity in the face of climate change, promoting conservation, and protecting the environment. We also emphasize that making land safe builds economic opportunity, which underpins political stability and security. Through humanitarian mine action, we are also helping our partners to better serve historically underserved communities, ensuring the full inclusion of women in building all aspects of peace and security across the globe, and reducing pressures that drive large-scale destabilizing migration. And that's not a comprehensive list either. Demining and unexploded ordnance removal is undoubtedly the right thing to do, but it's also the smart thing to do from a national security perspective. It's important to remember, however, that there are no magic one-size-fits-all answers here. Not all donor governments alike. They have differing policy priorities and motivations for providing assistance. And even within a single government, priorities and motivations aren't static. They evolve as elections take place, senior policy decision makers come and go, and in reaction to real-world developments. This means staying tuned into whatever motivates individual donor governments today and being able to adapt quickly as those priorities and motivations shift. For my team, we can't take for granted that all of the policy priorities I listed a minute ago will remain policy priorities tomorrow. It's vital that we maintain understanding of evolving priorities and that we remain ready to demonstrate to our decision makers how mine action can help advance critical issues that are most important to them. One fundamental, though often overlooked, principle of foreign assistance is that donor governments provide assistance because it is in their interest to do so. Understanding those national interests and articulating how mine action can advance those interests, then, is the key to ensuring humanitarian mine action funding remains strong in the face of today's fiscal realities. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Chantler, de vos...
Thank you very much, Mrs. Chantler, for your reflections, really precious. Now I give the floor to the EU representative that will shed a light on finances of this very important donor at the international level, France is chairing this semester the Council of European Union, and in that extent, in fact, we've suggested that we would create a unique point of contact, unique counter, and my neighbor will tell you as well, because the programs are decided in 7 or 6 different programs: culture, humanitarian, development, direction, stabilization of peace, direction. And sometimes, we have so many committees, and sometimes even us, member states, we have the feeling that we don't have a strategy, global strategy, or neither an absolute vision, because each counter, each body is managing differently. Often I've heard NGOs saying we are struggling, we don't know who to reach for, and etc. So, of course, I applaud all the EU is doing, but obviously after his speech you will know much more. Thank you very much.
Ambassador, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, so my name is Peter Lawson. I work for the Directorate for the Integrated Approach to Security and Peace within the External Action Service of the EU. It's a great pleasure and honor to attend this event, to participate in the many discussions that we've had over the last day and a half, and indeed to be able to address you on this important matter. Just to maybe start by saying that I fully subscribe to many and really all the things said by the previous speakers. I think the importance of many of the thematic elements related to climate, related to gender, related to food security. These are things I'll come back to in my short presentation, but they are indeed essential. And we need to have a holistic and integrated approach to demining as part of a broader humanitarian development and peace and stability approach. And indeed, of course, the pressures on I'm sure on national budgets, certainly on the European instruments, is of course increasing as we see the many crises and whether it's pandemic, whether it is the Russian military aggression on Ukraine, or other conflicts across the world. This clearly makes prioritization more important than ever. Now, I wanted to move. Our instruments, of course, remain in place, remain committed to the priorities that we have. I very much hear the remarks of the ambassador regarding the many different elements that can support mine action. I hope to be able to provide a little bit of clarity in that regard. Since 2021, we have a new foreign policy instrumental setup, and that's really where my focus will be. I will provide an overview of the various instruments and facilities within the EU that support mine action and clearance of unexploded ordnance. Try to understand, explain a little bit what the different focuses are, and provide some examples on how they are used concretely to have a real impact in the field in different parts of the world. Now, I will, of course, talk about support provided through EU instruments. There is really important bilateral work done by EU member states, including France and many others, that obviously is not within my remit to talk about today. But within the EU system, funding for demining can come from many different sources. It depends on the nature, even the location of the action. As mentioned, demining doesn't really have its own unified mechanism. It is spread across different fields, whether humanitarian development, peace and stability, crisis response, or support for non-proliferation and disarmament. So when we look at demining funding from the EU, we need to ask ourselves a number of questions, such as is it military or civilian humanitarian in nature? I mean, the vast majority of EU support is humanitarian in nature, but as I will mention, there are now other possibilities available. This is in response to a sudden development or crisis, or is an attempt to tackle a structural or ongoing issue? Is the purpose demining, capacity building, training, awareness? I mean, basically, which pillar, which of the 5 pillars is it addressing? Who is the beneficiary and who is the entity carrying out the action? Now, the EU has a long history of providing support for demining. We recognize the challenge of mine contamination poses to the life and well-being of people around the world. But it is also an obstacle to free movement, to development, and to the use of natural resources and arable land. And the latter is particularly important today when the food insecurity crisis is at our doorsteps. Mine action support has been described as one of the high priorities of EU foreign policy and is closely linked to the realisation of the 2030 agenda and environmental considerations, as well as the concept of early warning, conflict prevention, crisis management, post-conflict rehabilitation, and the entire toolbox that we have in place in that part of our foreign external action. In 2020, the EU was the second largest donor in mine action after our American friends, contributing more than 78 million euros to 15 countries in Africa, Asia, Europe, the Middle East, and South America. For 2021 to 2022, we expect the trend to be similar, with a special focus on Bosnia and Herzegovina as well as the South Caucasus region. But all of this is, and needless to say, all of this is without taking into account the implications of the Russian military aggression in Ukraine. This aggression has already had far-reaching consequences, including in the area of mine action, and exceptional EU support measures are ongoing. And speaking as an EU representative here, I'm now, this is not something that I had planned to say, but in light of the developments of yesterday, I just want to take a moment to recognize the candidate status granted to Ukraine by the EU member states, which is, of course, a historic moment with great symbolic importance. And we, again, it sort of demonstrates the commitment that we have for Ukraine and also the Ukrainian commitment to European values, which are indeed also the UN and mine action values around the sanctity of the individual and the right to live in a free and without fear of violence or oppression. So that additional commitment in mine action will be a very concrete line of action for us as well. So the new multi-annual financial framework, the new long-term budget for the year, for the period of 2021 to 2027, saw several significant innovations, notably the creation of a single major funding mechanism for external action. This is the NDC Global Europe instrument. This replaces a wide range of instruments, including the Instrument Contributing to Stability and Peace, the Development Cooperation Instrument, and the Off-Budget European Development Fund, which played an important role in financing a range of trust funds. In my presentation, I will focus on our current setup, but of course, many of the projects that are still running are funded under these previous instruments. The NDC Global Europe, this unified EU financing mechanism, is a major step forward. It brings together many separate financing tools into three main pillars: geographic, thematic, and rapid response. They all have different characters. The geographic pillar is programmable in the long term. The thematic has a peace, stability, and conflict prevention pillar with global application without a particular priority. And the rapid response is non-programmable and only reacts in relation to an emerging crisis or event. Now, there is also a small cushion. Alongside this NDC Global Europe with the three pillars, there is an instrument for pre-accession assistance for candidate countries. And there's also the possibility to provide support, humanitarian aid support. And there's a small budget for non-proliferation and disarmament. Off budget, there is a possibility to provide support, for member states to provide support through the EU Civil Protection Mechanism. And another innovation is the European Peace Facility, which is a new mechanism for support to military actors. And as you heard, our primary focus is on humanitarian demining, but this makes it possible to provide demining support to military actors that may have access to areas where NGOs or humanitarian actors may struggle to reach. Now, how you prioritize actions really depends on what the character of that action is. So, for instance, with the geographic pillar, it has to be a long-term, ongoing concern that can be programmed in advance. And then the next opportunity, really, the midterm review of this pillar will take place in the mid-2024. For the thematic pillar, at the moment, it's not really being used for the purposes of mine action. And it has to be actions that don't really have a specific geographic focus. And the pillar that's probably most used at the moment is the rapid response pillar for urgent and crisis needs. And they are actions under this periodic by definition short-term in duration, cannot be used for long-term sustained support. This pillar supports a wide range of mine action in Libya, in Syria, in Ukraine, in the short term. Now, the EU has a long history of supporting mine action across the world, from Asia to Africa, often in partnership with the UN, such as in Colombia. We could recite recent actions such as supporting communities affected by the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh, in both Armenia and Azerbaijan, through a humanitarian aid funds program in 2021, to funding humanity and inclusion work in Chad on demining and risk awareness through the EU Trust Fund for Africa, which started in 2017. I will give you 3 quick examples of new and ongoing support. Looking first at Libya, here we continue to support a range of capacity building and mine awareness actions through the old instrument contributing to stability and peace. We have ongoing projects funded through this mechanism, one in support of UNSMIL, and provide training and support to Libyan demining. We work with Dunchurch Aid and the Halo Trust in other projects to create safer communities. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, we have renewed our long-standing support to demining, but this time, in an example of what I mentioned earlier, through the European Peace Facility, supporting the demining battalion of the Bosnian Armed Forces, by the provision of the relevant equipment and appropriate financing for demining in the field. Creating a local capacity for the Bosnian government to be able to address mine pollution in the country. Now, I've saved, let's say, the best to last. The situation as regards explosive contamination in Ukraine is deteriorating rapidly. This is a challenge both in the short term, in terms of obstruction for the provision of humanitarian aid, or blocking access to agricultural land, as I mentioned earlier. And in the long term, as the level of mine pollution points to a lengthy process of demining. Mine contamination blocks access to land. And in Ukraine, we are seeing a mine crisis that is exacerbating a global food security crisis by hampering one of the largest grain exporters of the world. Now, we are mobilizing, on the EU side, we are mobilizing an unprecedented array of actions to support Ukraine. And mine action is an essential element of this action. This is not just an issue for Ukraine or for Europe, but for the entire world, as this literal breadbasket needs to be able to sow and to reap in peace, and without the threat of unexploded ordnance or mines. So we here, to go back to the instruments, we are already providing support through NDG Global Europe, the Rapid Response Pillar, through the Civil Protection Mechanism, and through the European Peace Facility. Now, there are a number of operators that are accredited in Ukraine, and we rely very much on the expertise of colleagues who are present here and have been present during the conference, such as the Halo Trust and DRC. We have an ongoing dialogue with our Ukrainian counterparts, and some of you will have attended a very interesting side event hosted by them on the support needed. And we also understand that they are working on the legislative requirements related to the accreditation of further demanding organizations, as well as for the authorization of the use of explosives in mine action. This is very, very welcome, because that would in fact help shift up the ability of the mining associations and mine actors to provide real support by a gear. So to conclude, as you have heard, a range of instruments can be deployed to address different aspects of mine action in the same theatre, in line with an integrated approach. Information sharing and coordination between these different instruments is essential to ensure that the best use of resources and the appropriate instrument is deployed in every single instance. And this includes certainly ongoing liaison with other actors, whether national NGOs and international organizations, including in the UN system. We have supported mine action and demining at all levels, local, national, regional, and multilateral, for decades. The funding opportunities depend on the nature and location of the mine challenge to address. The EU is firmly committed to a mine-free future and to addressing mine pollution across the globe. It's now more important than ever to focus on immediate and decisive mine action in Libya, in the Western Balkans, and across the world. We will continue to work together with like-minded countries and organizations, with the UN system, with all the key NGOs and all other actors. And with great urgency, we all need to do our utmost to address the situation in many countries, now very urgently in Ukraine, to ensure access to arable land, to make sure that the mine crisis does not exacerbate an ongoing food crisis. The stakes could not be higher, and we trust in your support and in our joint effort. Thank you very much.
Très complet et qui montre aussi comment.
Thank you very much for your complete presentation, which shows that the EEAS is the European External Action Service is able to act very quickly in situations of crisis. Now, I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Jessica Morales, who is a deputy in Colombia and who has been an activist for a long time in mine action.
Thank you very much. So Juan Camilo Restrepo, the Commissioner for Peace, is here in Geneva. So I will give him the floor so he can speak on behalf of Colombia. Thank you, Jessica. Good afternoon. Greetings also to the panelists, fellow panelists. I thank this opportunity to share our experiences when coordinating our mine action in Colombia. In Colombia, the integrated mine action of the High Peace Commissioner is the entity responsible for creating and coordinating the national strategy of the integral action against mines. It also creates the plans, programs, and projects for acting against mines in Colombia, among other roles it has. In Colombia, mine action is included in the National Development Plan of 2018 to 2022. In the last years, Colombia has done a step forward when updating the national strategy for mine action through 3 processes, such as the Strategic Plan 2020-2025, the Operating Plan for Demining, and the further program for the Framework Plan for 2025. We now have until 2025 in order to complete all the cleaning tasks that are to be made. When identifying this new strategy, we found a mature process of mine action and national belonging that allows us to have 2 organizations of national military capacity and 5 organizations of civil nature. I repeat myself, 2 military organizations and 5 civil organizations. When it comes to funding, Colombia estimates around $41 million as a public budget for funding demining actions and the activities of the High Commissioner for Peace. Our office had a budget of $1.3 million allowed by the states. From these resources, 82% were allocated to education, risk education activities, and obviously to helping victims in an integral way. I repeat, victims. The victims are the center of our policies. Nevertheless, despite this evidence and these trends, the mine action has asked for a higher budget for the new areas designated thanks to the strengthening of the action after the signing the peace agreement with the FARC in 2016. When it comes to the mining action, we consider different variables such as the number of accidents, victims, and events registered in the region, but also we take into account the catalyzing effect of the demining when implementing strategic policies such as land restitution, the reubication of displaced population, and we include some region in the development plan, the territorial development plan, and all this is included in the agreement signed. We prioritize 170 regions and municipalities. The national government and international community organize a structure with 5 themes in order to coordinate demands and to canalize resources. We should implement on an earlier stage the agreement, and we should allocate resources for post-conflict. And this is managed by the multi-donor fund of the United Nations for Peace. This has been efficient in order to canalize donors who are interested in implementing the peace agreements, and it is proved itself efficient in mine actions and in cleaning territories. We act in coordination with the different organizations of the states and donors, and we act defined by the priorities established by the populations. This has proven the catalyzing role of the mine action. When it comes to opportunities and funding efficiency in crisis time, we would like to point your attention to the importance of sharing the right messages, the steps forward, and the necessities in every mine action program. 25 years after the signature of the Mine Action Convention, our sector is now mature and has the capabilities to put on forward the fight. Nevertheless, if non-state armed group keep on working with explosive ordnance, I repeat myself, non-state armed groups, NLD, for example, drug cartels, if they keep on using explosives and mines, the spirit of the convention, and for example, in Colombia's case, it is needed that the donor community keeps on the founding, and we should integrate the lessons to new humanitarian needs. A clear example of that is the need of strengthened links in mine action and migration flows and urban violence. May God protect Colombia. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Merci de nous avoir fait ce point sur la Colombie.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for telling us about what happens in Colombia. I remember going into Pilot Village in Colombia, which was where the former FARC guerrilleros were working in collaboration with the Colombian army. So behind demining, you have the idea of reinstating or reintroducing old former guerrilla roles and having them work in the demining sector in the mine action field. So now I'd like to come back to more general comments. I would like to give the floor to the General Brigadier Khalid Hamda Mardella, who is directing the Center for Mine Action in Sudan, who started his role in May 2020 and who will share with us the perspectives of development and funding for the mine action in Sudan. General, you have the floor.
Thank you very much to all the colleagues who spoke just before me.
الله وبركاته. يسعدني أن أشارك في هذا العرض بخصوص هذا الموضوع الحيوي الهام في مجال مكافحة.
When it comes to demining, the next slide, please. Now, historically, mines have been used for many years in conflicts and wars that have happened across the world. They are used so they would actually fill the gap of troops in certain areas. They were used in the past by regular forces and also by rebels. And the reason that they want to use them and they want to possess them is really because it's very easy for them to have them and plant them without the need to high capability and skills, despite the mine's impact is everlasting until the war ends. Next slide, please. Now, the groups that are actually under the biggest threat for these mines would be the civilians who want to earn a living and are engaged in agriculture, grazing, collecting firewood and water in mine-affected areas. The mine clearance process, it requires a lot of time because of the vastness of the minefields in addition to the high cost of demining. Because the cost of placing a mine ranges between $3 to $30, while the cost of clearance ranges between $100 to $1,000 per mine, which requires huge sums for the mine action program, especially in extraordinary conditions. Funding means the provision of cash and material resources to promote and develop mine action programs through international and local mobilization and the utilization of available local resources to implement and achieve these goals. The funding of mine action program must have clear management and transparency at all levels so it moves in the right direction. Extraordinary conditions are unusual circumstances which a state or society is unable to provide the necessary support to clear and remove mines and remnants of war. These conditions can be summarized as follows: war and conflict and disasters, floods, conditions and prevalence of disease, political conditions and disturbances. All of these conditions have a direct impact on mine clearance or funding them. And these are the conditions that means that we have conditions in place necessary to overcome them to carry out this humanitarian action. Most states that have a large number of mines are poor. However, they may be resource-rich, but conflicts and mines negatively impact the utilization of such resources, and hence they are unable to fund demining activities or to do so to the level where they can clear such fields. The most of terrain where the conflicts occur is rough terrain, not to mention heavy rainfall, such as the case of Sudan, which places obstacles and hampers demining and makes it a seasonal process. Next slide, please. Mines are placed many times near borders due to cross-border conflicts that happened in the past, which requires coordination between the countries to clear minefields. Next slide, please. And now the next slide again. And then the next slide. Now, challenges that face us when it comes to demining, we have plenty, but the most important ones is security. This is the first challenge. that faces demining, which means that it hampers the access to such areas because of conflict, which also endangers the people who want to demine. Additionally, another one is the high cost of demining and the poor economies of many of the affected states. We also have the rough terrain where mines are planted and the suffering to reach them. This is a third challenge. And also we have another one, which was in the last few years, which is COVID, which greatly limited demining efforts lately. Additionally, the unavailability of records and maps of where there are mines, especially where they are located, especially when they are planted by irregular armies and rebels. The need for equipment with capability in demining activities, because some areas are actually quite deep. We also have another challenge we must overcome, which is natural conditions, such as heavy rainfall and floods. We also have the linking of funding, many times by donors, to the political stance of the impacted country. And the final one is to register new areas where they have impacts, especially for countries now where they said that they would actually carry out their commitments, but then they said there are other areas now that have remnants of war. All of these challenges are there. However, there are opportunities now, which would actually reduce these. Let's go to the next slide, please. The first one is the support that's given to the impacted country after it signs Ottawa Agreement. And this is actually a call to the impacted countries that haven't signed. So we ask you to accede to this agreement, and therefore you would get international support so that you would actually match those commitments. Additionally, there must be a relationship between national centres and UNMAS, because this facilitates overcoming these challenges. We also opportunities the support provided by some donors to impacted states, and this is where we would thank a lot all the countries that continuously support us in overcoming all the obstacles that impact us when it comes to demining. There's also support provided for demining by governments and economic entities in impacted states. Additionally, another opportunity is the presence of national and international organizations with high skills in demining activities. The initiatives carried out by states such as Sudan, where they hold an annual national forum attended by the government, the United Nations, and the donors. This forum gives us a connection between all the centers and the donors and the United Nations, and makes sure that all the donors are participating in all activities, including field visits and all the celebrations that we had when we managed to clear certain areas. Additionally, there is an opportunity, which is the possibility of intensifying awareness campaigns. Awareness campaigns are the less costly in affected areas that reduce injuries until demining is completed, which always is a slow process. The relationships between states and the possibility of South-South cooperation between national centres to exchange benefits and carry out joint demining activities. And the final opportunity is the participation of the private sector in funding demining inside the country which is impacted by mines. Next slide, please. And at the end, to demine, we require all the efforts between countries that are impacted to join their forces together so that they would allow demining to occur and to give the best support possible. And then we require it to coordinate between the United Nations and the donors and also the affected countries so that they would contribute effectively in demining activities. And also effort is required between voluntary organizations so that they would spend efforts in demining activities according to the standards that are acceptable. Carrying all of this would really give us a safe community. And thank you very much.
أشكر جدا المذيع العام
I would like to thank you for his giving us his opinion regarding funding of demining activities and in the future of his ideas on support between participants in Sudan. Thank you very much.
La parole aux organisations qui...
I would now like to give the floor to some organizations who would like to react on this. I thought that Tajikistan was asking for the floor, was asking to speak.
I am Muhammad Ibrahim Zoda, Director of Tajikistan National Mine Action Center. This center was established in the country under Government Republic of Tajikistan in order to ensure the implementation of the Ottawa Convention in the national capacity building material and technical base, strengthening the planning capacity, coordination and resource mobilization in accordance with national and international standards, as well as training of local experts on land release. The remaining challenges as of end 2021 is 166 hazard areas, confirmed hazard area and suspect hazard area, measuring more than 8.5 million square meters to be addressed by the end 2025 with current national and international resources. But additional funds is still required for increasing the existing capacity. About $15 million is required to complete to set tasks by deadline. Currently, the U.S. Department of State is the largest foreign donors for our program. Also, government of Norway and OSCE make a great contribution to support the land release operation in the country. Prior donors of our program are Canada, Germany, the UK, Japan, Switzerland, France, Sweden, Belgium, Australia. And we are very grateful for their valuable contribution to Tajikistan Mine Action Program in prior years. Tajikistan has a solid legislative base and human resources for land release operation. Recognizing that capacity must be increased, the government of Tajikistan is ready to provide the personnel needed for additional teams through the military authorities as their contribution to meeting country obligation in front of the Ottawa Convention. We are in full commitment to perform our responsibility with the purpose to meet the obligation and make the life of our people safe. On behalf of Republic of Tajikistan, I would like to thank our current donors, U.S. Department of State, OSCE, Norway, and our partners, FSD, NPA, JSHD, ISU, RCRC, for their valuable contribution to Tajikistan Mine Action Program. And I would like to urge the international donors community to render support to Tajikistan Mine Action Program to make our country mine-free, and by doing this, improve the lives of our people and help the economy of Tajikistan grow. Thank you very much for your attention.
Je vous remercie. Y a-t-il un autre intervenant?
Thank you very much. Is there another speaker? I cannot read from here. Yes, Sri Lanka.
Thanks to given to me the floor. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kirti Ranjit Abesiriwardana, Director National Mine Action Center in Sri Lanka. First of all, allow me to express the government of Sri Lanka's sincere gratitude to all for your generous support to Sri Lanka's mine action program. While COVID-19 has resulted in exceptional challenges, we are pleased to inform you that Sri Lanka's mine action program has embarked on several important activities in a collaborative manner with all international and national operators. We are delighted to let you know that National Mine Action Center has started NTS to further clarify the remaining contamination problem. This will allow us to develop our national mine action strategy next week based on the updated contaminations figure. This strategy is particularly important given the critical stage of Sri Lanka's mine action program on its path to completion. The identification and clearance of explosive ordnance, including anti-personnel mine areas, have been ongoing in Sri Lanka since 2002. The National Mine Action Center and Sri Lanka Army's humanitarian demining units are working in close collaboration with national operators Dash and Sharps and international operators Hello Trust and MAG to identify the clear EO in line with national mine action standards, drawing on funding from the government of Sri Lanka and several international donors. With the accession to the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention in December 2017, Sri Lanka has committed to identify and clear all anti-personnel mine areas by 1 June 2028, in line with its Article 5 obligations. Sri Lanka is, however, confident that it will be able to fulfill this obligation by 2026. National Mine Action Center has predicted that total USD $75 million is required to achieve this target. Sri Lanka experienced a major reduction in mine accidents during the last 10 years, with only 2 mine-related accidents recorded in 2021. Sri Lanka recognizes that women, girls, boys, and men may be affected differently by mine ERW contaminations due to their roles and responsibilities, and might therefore have specific and verified need and priorities. As per the findings of the Need Assessment Survey of the Mine and ERW Victims, National Mine Action Center has allocated 80 million in the year 2021 to provide immediate assistance to the mine and ERW victims. However, National Mine Action Center has estimated US $100,000 per year for next 3 years to provide durable solution uplift of the mine and ERW victims. Residual mine ERW contamination is long-term issue, and explosive ordnance risk education is requirement for safe return, because demining does not guarantee land free of the residual hazard. EORE activities in Sri Lanka were drastically reduced since 2017 due to lack of funding by the UNICEF. To fulfill the vacuum, the government of Sri Lanka has set aside $4 million to perform EORW activities in affected areas. However, this amount is insufficient to cover all the affected districts. Accident rate and illegal explosive harvesting are increasing again. Therefore, EORE has to be continued in the mine affected areas. National Mine Action Center estimated that an annual investment of roughly US $100,000 will allow EORE organizations to keep casualty rates to bare minimum. This is especially essential because contamination in all mine-affected districts is still present in close proximity to the large number of population centers. Since 2002, demining work has provided to solid livelihood for over 12,000 people, including women, heads of households, and persons with disabilities. As the country moves towards becoming mine-free in 2026, it is of vital importance to ensure that the livelihood of over 12,000 people is supported, and that the demining workforce can make the most of their experience and skills gained in mine action sector. By being supported to transition into mainstream economic sectors, the Mine Action Center has prepared a strategy for demobilization of demining workforce with the assistance of the demining operators. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Government of Sri Lanka and its partner very much look forward to continuing our collaboration with you all on Sri Lanka's path to completion by 2026. We Sri Lanka kindly request you to all study our program and help to move towards becoming mine-free Sri Lanka in 2026. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Je vous remercie. Je crois qu'il y a encore le temps avant la clôture d'entendre un intervenant.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for another speaker before we close the meeting.
Thank you, Excellencies. Thank you for this opportunity to highlight and to herald an understated and little-known mine action program in Central Asia, that being the Tajikistan Mine Action Program. The United States support and assistance to Tajikistan focuses on the clearance of legacy landmines, unexploded ordnance, and other explosive remnants of war, and as well as the inventory, accountability, and destruction of excess, obsolete, and unserviceable conventional ammunition stockpiles. Since 2008, the U.S. has engaged Tajikistan in humanitarian mine action, and as of June 2022, the U.S. assistance has totaled more than $33 million. A few programmatic points. In 2006, with assistance of the United Nations Development Program, Tajikistan inaugurated their National Mine Action Program and their information database with more than 78 square kilometers of suspected hazard area. In 2010, Tajikistan had effectively reduced, cleared, and canceled more than 49 square kilometers of the suspected area. Today, Tajikistan estimates a remaining 8.5 square kilometers of landmine contamination and an additional 2.5 kilometers of battle area contamination. In August 2019, Tajikistan inaugurated the Regional Explosive Hazards Training Center and has trained over 300 Central Asian students in EOD levels 1 through 3, and it is a recognized leader in landmine clearance, explosive hazard remediation, and the management of legacy ammunition stockpiles. In October 2019, Tajikistan petitioned and received a 5-year extension of their anti-personnel mine ban treaty obligations. And in this appeal, they requested international donor support and assistance with their operational and organizational management of survey and clearance activities along the Tajik-Afghan border. In 2022, the Tajikistan Mine Action Program hosts the following survey, clearance, and explosive hazards reduction capacity: 1 weapons and ammunition disposal team, 12 mixed-gender multitask humanitarian demining teams, 5 non-technical survey teams with technical intervention capability, 2 mechanical mine clearance machines, Mini Mine Wolf and MV4 Flail, and 1 regional explosive hazards training center with controlled demolition site and off-campus training facilities. From 2022 through 2025, the United States will provide $2.5 million in annual funding to support HMA capacity in Tajikistan. We strongly encourage prior donors and partners to return and to increase their support of the Tajikistan Mine Action Program to help them achieve their mine-free status in 2025. As previously listed, the prior donors, Australia, Belgium, Canada, France, Germany, Japan, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom, are all asked to consider this outreach. Thank you, Mr.
Merci beaucoup de...
Thank you so much for this call for contribution. I see a last person wishing to speak. Yes, you have the floor.
Oui.
Yes, you have the floor. Yes, I can't read your nameplate from here. I need glasses. Oh, I need other glasses.
Bonsoir tout le monde.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm Colonel Baham, coordinator of the National Program of Demining, Humanitarian Demining Clearance Program in Mauritania. And I'm using this opportunity to extend my greetings and most distinguished greetings to all the participants, and I'm thanking the organizers. Please excuse me, because I won't do an exhaustive, full inventory of all the different actions. So here I'm speaking to the different countries of the world, NGOs, and all the stakeholders when it comes to humanitarian clearance in these different countries, using these different pillars. Obviously, you will excuse me not having an a full inventory in which I will stress out the different positive actions you've carried out, nobly positive actions. But I would like, thanks to my intervention, I would like to remind that it's been a while that we've been observing that the donor countries, these international institutions, are focusing on a certain number of countries in the world. I'm thinking about the world in its general sense, obviously. And other countries are, I would like to say, left to relegated to a second or even a third plan. So by the same way, I would wish for a reflection in that direction being done, and that we would have an international global cooperation that will be effective, that will be put into practice in order to get an Earth without mines, with this slogan, one step, one house, one land, one ground. With your support, we will triumph. And thank you very much. Thank you very much, Colonel, mostly for these last words, which are a perfect conclusion of our plenary session, which is calling upon the forces of the good. And I will repeat, France has repeatedly reminded that if we want a world without means, we need to have all countries being free from mines. So this is very important. And mostly when we think about these countries such as Iraq, Ukraine, etc. And this is important that we also close the session with good news, with good words. And it's been a long time that we've not applauded a country which has been freed of mines. And hopefully soon we will see a country which has ended up its clearance process. And I would like us, after such interesting presentations we had from donor countries, representative of beneficiaries, I would like everyone to applaud our speakers before we move on to the closing ceremony. Thank you very much.